Welcome, everybody, to the Big Book Roundtable and the RICO 12 family of recovery resources targeted at people from all backgrounds, faiths, and places dealing with addictions of all varieties. We are having a great time, David, Nikki, and myself sitting around this virtual roundtable discussing, diving deep into the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, reading page by page, line by line, and going into it. And we're glad that you're here with us. Today, we're going to continue our reading, but before we get into that, I'll introduce myself real quick. I'm Justin B. I am a recovering addict of multiple areas in my life where unmanageability and powerlessness just dominate me, but I am grateful to be living in the miracle of recovery. I'm joined today by David G. and Nikki M. David, why don't you take a second and introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Justin, thank you for your service as always. And Nikki, it's so good to always be at this round table with you. My name is David G. from Oklahoma. I am an alcoholic and a dopeless hope fiend, and things are good in my life right now. Thank you so much. Good to be here.
A dopeless hope fiend. Love it. Nikki, introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Nikki M. And how do I want to introduce myself today? Because there's so many ways in this program. I'm a member, I'm a spearhead, I'm a child of God, I'm all of the above. But most importantly today, I'm just excited to be at this table as Nikki M., a grateful member of any and all Anonymouses, and with my guys.
And I'm happy to be around the table with both of you. All right, today we're going to continue reading in the chapter More About Alcoholism, and we're picking up on the stories. We've already read one story a couple of episodes ago about the man of 30, and today we're going to continue into Jim's story. And this is a powerful story, one that I often take sponsees to when there's trouble, and it's just a powerful thing. So we'll start here at page 35 on Jim's story. Everybody grab your highlighter, your big book. Let's follow along, take some notes, highlight, because we're going to get some good stuff out of these next couple of pages today. All right, here we go. Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He has a commendable World War record. He is a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He is an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in a serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family, for whom he had a deep affection. Yet he got drunk again. We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. This is his story. I came to work on Tuesday morning. I remember I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. Then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I would get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which was familiar, for I had been going to it for years. I had eaten there many times during the months I was sober. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Since still no thought of drinking, I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. Suddenly the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. I ordered a whiskey and poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart, but felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey, and I poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was a threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic, yet all reasons for drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if he only mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else? All right. There's a lot in this story, but it is one story, and we're going to dive into this thing today. And I'm grateful to do this. It's a powerful thing. Let's get in. David, tell us a little bit about some of the things that you pull out of this story and out of these pages.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Justin, so much. There's so much here. God, this is warning after warning after warning for me. Jim the car salesman that here on 35 is attributed to the story of a man by the name of Ralph Furlong, who got sober through meeting Wilson. And his story appears on page 357 of the first edition, and it was called The Prodigal Story. And so this is who Jim really was, because as it reads, it says, a man we shall call Jim. It doesn't mean his name is Jim. It's just, it's anonymous, right? But this is a powerful story. And bottom paragraph 35, we told him what we knew of alcoholism. That's step 1. And the answer that we had found, that's step 2. He made a beginning. That's step 3. Because if you read on page 63, it says this is only a beginning. So let's look at the blessings of the first 3 steps for Jim and many others, including myself. Family gets reassembled. He gets to work again for a salesman for a business he lost through drinking. That's what brings on the resentment that really gets him. And all goes well for a time, and that changes the entire paragraph for me. And this is where it's most important. He fails to enlarge on his spiritual life, which we know today is steps 4 through 9. And then 10, 11, and 12 are what we call, the growth steps, or I do. And so to his consternation, which is a feeling of anxiety, is what that word means, he finds himself drunk about 6 times, back to back to back to back. And so I like the sentence. It says, on each of these occasions we work with them are good members. Usually after 2 or 3 relapses, you're ready to, all right, dude, you're not ready. Get on out of here. But these guys were good. They worked with him every time. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in serious condition. That's step 1. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum, jail, treatment, whatever you want to call it today. He knew these things, and I knew these things. With sex addiction, I knew that I was going to lose my family. I knew I was going to lose my career. I knew all this, and I just could not stop. Why? Because even though I've solidly did steps 1, 2, and 3, and a power greater than myself has entered the scene now and begin to relieve me of some of the insanity by me failing to enlarge on my spiritual life in 4 through 9, it's going to come back again. And that's what happens to him on 36. He gets drunk again. So they ask him to tell him what happened. He gives a story. I'm kind of that way. You ask me what happened, I give you a story. But we can pick out what happened to him right here. He comes to work on Tuesday morning. He says, I felt. And anytime I see that word in the book, it's underlined, stars above, all over. Anytime I feel that irritation, the doctor's opinion told me that I'd be irritable, restless, and discontent the day it'd come I'd drink again. And that's what's happened here. So he's irritated. He's got to be a salesman for a concern he once owned. That's a resentment. He has a few words with the boss, nothing serious. I think that's dishonesty, because I've had a lot of words with the boss. None of them, they were always serious. He says, then I decided. Now he's making decisions based on self. That's his first mistake. So he takes action based on that decision. He heads to the country. On the way, there's that word again. I felt hungry. He didn't say he was hungry. He just kind of felt that way. So I'm going to stop where there's a bar. I'm sure there's a lot of other places that Jim could eat, but he stops at a bar. So you see how that feeling, that notion, that thinking, and he doesn't have any defense because he's only got the first 3 steps. And we talked about this, I think, in the last couple of episodes, of how self-discipline, it's disciplining us to do the things that it wants us to do, because we've not taken regular inventory. We've not done any of this. He says, I had no intention of drinking. I just thought, there it is again, that word. I get a sense. I also had the notion. That's a belief. See how these things are setting him up. He said, I'd eaten there many times through the months I was sober. So that tells me on the first 3 steps, he had stayed sober some months. So he sits down to the table, orders a sandwich, a glass of milk. There's nothing insane about that. Still no thought, keyword, of drinking. No, because it's lying in ambush. It's lying in wait. We looked at that word notion, lurking notion, last episode or two. That's exactly what's happening here. So now he takes the decision based on that thought. He orders another sandwich and decides. He makes a decision based on self. I'm a big boy. 2 sandwiches, 2 glasses of milk are a lot. They just are. I can do it, but I'm not doing it because I'm hungry. I'm doing it because I'm eating. I'm overeating. But look how the insanity comes. It comes suddenly and it comes vaguely. He said, suddenly the drink didn't show up. Suddenly the food didn't show up. The sex, the lust, the love addiction. Suddenly the thought crossed my mind that if I was to put an ounce of whiskey in the milk, it wouldn't hurt me on the full. So he orders a whiskey, triggers the allergy. Vaguely, that word means unfocused. But look what he says. I felt reassured, and they've got that italicized, felt, because I'm taking the whiskey on a full stomach. See how the mind will deceive us? That experiment went so well, he orders another. Of course he does. The allergy's triggered now. Now the mind set him up. The allergy's got him, and he's going for a butt kicking. So I can relate to this story, but it wasn't until I started picking apart what happened to him that I really began to see that's what happened to me time after time. I can't say it enough. We have to recover from the notion, from the thought, from the feelings, all that stuff. That's what we have to recover from here. Or eventually it'll always lead us back to something we never intended to do. So anyway, thank you for calling on me to share, Justin.
Yeah, there's so much in there, and I've circled all of these words that you're referencing, and we'll get into a question I have for you. But first, Nikki, as we read through that, talk to me about your experience and how you identify with these things.
Okay, and thank you, David. I just love learning. I think that's exciting. Remember in school we hated it, but today we're like more. Right at the beginning of this paragraph, I have relapse. So when I take my sponsees there or I'm here, I just know this is all about our friend Jim who relapses. And it happens fast. Why? I'm in the progressive disease and it doesn't discriminate anybody. And so I love this line. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. I've been here a while, and we all get our gifts. And my gift is sponsoring dry drunks. I don't, and it sounds awful. And I've had a sponsor say, Nikki, don't say you don't sponsor newcomers. I do. But if someone's brand new and I've got a whole team of sponsees and they're just learning how to sponsor, I'm going to give that brand new person in the room to my sponsees. And I'm going to take someone who has failed to enlarge his spiritual life because he's dying sober. And my line out says what? He stopped putting God first. This is simple. See, at the beginning of this, it asks us as sponsors, and my sponsor did this to me. I don't remember because, you're blacked out when you come in, but they urge you. We are to urge you. That's what page 117 says. And page 58 says, we beg you not only to be fearless from the start, but to enlarge your spiritual life or you're going to drop dead sober. And I love this. Worked with him. This is what we do. We work with people and people worked with me along the years. This is my experience. This is because, we're real addicts. And again, put your sponsee to that test, put yourself to the test. Can you take it or leave it? No. And then I love this where it's like, and I did do the same thing too, Justin. We just follow David when he says the word, we circle it and do it. And my line out, I felt that's all lies. And on that top paragraph on page 36, I put resentment is the number one offender because he became irritated. That's what happened. Resentments will kill us. And all here, when he says like, what happened? He was nursing thoughts, you guys. He wasn't nursing anything but thoughts. And if you go back, because that's what happened, he started the mental blank spot and page 559. This is a magic book, everybody. And the very last paragraph of this magic book on page 559 of the story says, above all, we reject fantasizing and accept reality. I cannot imagine going back and working for the company I once owned. That's a mistake. And as I've told a sponsor recently, you've got to stop thinking about that career because last time you went back and you got that big job Oh, that's right. You didn't make it home because you got so drunk and couldn't get on the plane and you lost the big job again. So why don't you find a small job and something that will humble you? Because your old life, I can't go back and do the things I used to do. And that's what this guy's doing. He's nursing thoughts. He's fantasizing about everything. He's imagining getting even for the hurts and rejection, says page 59. And that's what I do. I don't nurse a drink. I nurse a thought, and it goes AWOL. And then suddenly the thought, and down here, he had knowledge about himself. Well, right? God gave me brains to use, and I know a lot about things, and knowledge alone, people, is not going to get you better, because we have every type of person in these rooms. We've got people with PhDs and no degree living under the bridge. So everyone's welcome, and we all have reasons to stop. But the foolish idea, the delusion, the lies, insanity, and I want to end here with what my pastor told me recently. I've got everybody. I'm looking for an imam, but I've got a yoga teacher. I've got a rabbi. I've got everybody in every hand. So, see, where religious people are right, I make use of every one of them. But insanity, it's a state in which Nikki does not behave in a balanced and healthy lifestyle. So insanity is a state in which we do not and behave in a balanced, unhealthy, or living, life-giving way. And I constantly make choices that undermine my well-being. See, I blame others for my problems. I insist on trying to control people. I give people, I care about the silent treatment. I put off doing the things that need to be done. I buy things that I don't need. I lose my temper. And that, my alcoholic friends, these little things are the things that are going to lead you to put the whiskey in your milk. I talk incessantly. I never listen. I overcommit. I mean, these are all the things that are insanity. It's so cunning, baffling, right? I want to be restored to sanity. So yeah, it's insanity to constantly undermine my well-being and my family's well-being and all of God's people's well-being. That is so insane.
Yeah, Nikki, thanks for going into that. I've got a couple of questions, one for each of you. David, question I have for you has to do with they both are very similar with this while sober concept. So here's my question for you, David. If I am checking all the boxes and even think I am enlarging my spiritual life, how can I be aware of the feeling, the thinking, or the doing other things based on self so that doesn't sneak up on me, or when it does, how can I react to that?
That's a great question, Justin. And it's one that I asked many times after 2019, 2020. And I just really didn't realize all of the things that the self were made up of, the concepts, the ideas, the beliefs, the feelings. But as I read through this, that's why I read through the book with people. It's not because I don't think that they know how to read or they can't comprehend. It's just I think that sometimes we're asleep in recovery and our mind won't really let us see the truth. And so, as I read all of these things about him, I need to look at my own experiences and see, has that happened to me? Because if you remember all the way back in the beginning, in the forwards, it said, that we're going to ask ourselves 3 questions, has that happened to me? Am I able to, did I think like that? Did I drink like that? And just stuff like that. But I guess to answer your question, step 10 has become so powerful for me now. And before, I used to always pray to be a good son, be a good husband, be a good father, all of these things. But really, whenever I started examining my motives, I seen that really, I really didn't care so much about being that. I did, but not to the extent that I should have. What I really cared about was you seeing me as oh man, he really loves his mother. Oh my God, look how he is with his wife. I just love it. It was all about me. It was about that sneaking notion that somehow I would get some praise for this. And so as I come back through this work, particularly in the inventory process this time, I really begin to dig those things out, because in column 3 of inventory, and when we get there, I have some templates that I can share. And is so powerful, because that's where I really begin to learn how self manifests in various ways. And that's what's defeated me. So step 10 helps me to stay on the other side of that. But until I know what it is, I'm just kind of shooting in the dark. So thank you, Justin, for that question.
And thank you for that answer, David. Nikki, kind of on the same line, the first part of Jim's story, he starts spiraling while sober. And I've heard people say, as I go through this book and I start seeing things, I can put while sober. I start doing these things while sober. It's before I get drunk, before I get high, before I get, whatever. And you talked about how you focus on sponsoring the dry drunk, somebody who's been in the room for a long time but is dying sober. Talk to us a little bit about your experience of the importance of recognizing these things before we get actually drunk.
Okay, that's a great question. And I just have to say, I hope I answer this right. The rooms have become watered down. This is it. That's all I can say, is that no one understands what's really going on, because even when you go into a meeting, you're only hearing just, keep coming back, just stop drinking, put the jug in the plug or whatever, or just don't call him anymore. Get a flip phone so you don't look at porn. Like, this is all not living. This is not what this is about. So number one, the rooms are real sick. That's my experience. Everybody, if you're mad at Nikki M and you're listening, please get a sponsor and do an inventory on me, and get a friend who will listen to your step 10. The rooms are real sick, because I spent 4 years dying in it in a diluted message. And I get a lot of flack from people, because I'll go into rooms like I think you shared on your last podcast, and thank you for that experience in our last session, about, feeling like a perpetrator in these rooms, because, that's not my experience of being a real alcoholic, but I suffer the real disease of alcoholism. So as David said, we're not awake enough at the beginning. We need each other to wake our spirits and souls up. So the longer I stay here, and the longer you guys wake up my spirit and soul with the undiluted message of the Big Book, and not leave out things like the rest of the book, the 164 pages that says it became customary. Let me read it so I don't mess it up. It became customary to set apart one night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone and everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. And I have someone in the rooms in Toronto, and they chase me around because I'm in, CA, and you can't share, Nikki, and all these things. And I said to my friend, I'm going to leave those rooms. I'm not going to go back. And she said, Nikki, you almost died in the other rooms, and we need you here because you're helping people who just can't see it. And then I had to go, people I admire, and I won't mention certain people, but, they lived 2,000 years ago. They had to go into certain rooms they didn't want to go into. A lot of people have to do things they don't want to do. Isn't that step 6 and 7? I have to stop doing the things I want to do. Stay where it's comfortable. Stay in certain things. Or do I start doing the things I don't want to do? Like go into rooms that don't really think I should be there because they're not armed with the facts of the undiluted message. And I have to stand tall as God's people and say, you're dying from your thinking, sir. You're dying from the gambling and the porn and all the other things, but you're really dying from self-sober. So that's been my experience, strength, and hope. And again, Justin, you don't realize that you're just, your experience with saying you're a perpetrator in a room where there's only alcoholics and you've never touched alcohol. You, my friend, deserve a seat at all those tables, as well as do I. I love you.
Thank you, Nikki. And that imposter syndrome really dives deep in those voices in my head when I start thinking, when I start reasoning, but gotta get self's voice out of there. David, what's a takeaway you have from what we've discussed and read today?
Well, there's no saying that I love so much, and it says, I can't stay clean on yesterday's shower. And that's just kind of how it is here. What the hell worked for me yesterday and all those years before getting to this undiluted process of the Big Book, it doesn't work for me today. It just doesn't. There's more things I have to do. I have to be more disciplined in my prayer life, in my meditation life, and working with others and carrying the message of the book. And So, if anything, I would say that's it. If we fail to perfect and enlarge on our spiritual life, there's trouble coming. There's trouble coming. And I know that to be the fact. And what's so cunning and baffling about it is I was in a meeting every day. I was giving book studies all the time. I was working with tons of people, but there were parts of my life that were just dishonest, and they were secretive, and I wasn't telling anybody about it. And as a result of that, eventually that caught up. There's a difference between restraint and recovery. I can put some restraint on not using, not drinking, not sleeping around, whatever it is, for a little while. But if I'm not truly practicing recovery, then like Jim, the day's going to come where the insanity is going to override. And it did. And so, I'm very aware of those things today, very, very aware. And I just try to stay transparent, first of all, with my God that lived 2,000 years ago, my wife, and it's in this order, then my sponsor, because he's taught me that my relationship with God is dependent upon a holy relationship with my wife. He told me something the other day that it just kind of floored me. He said, David, we know something that God doesn't know. And I thought, well, what the hell would that possibly be? And he said, it's the past. He said, it's tossed into a sea of forgetfulness. And the only reason we remember it's because we can help other people with it. And I don't want to forget that. I don't need to run around feeling guilty about what I did. I just need to get up off my ass and do something different today. So really glad to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Man, thank you, David. And that, I know something God doesn't know the past. That's super powerful. It's not going to be my takeaway, but that's going to be my takeaway. Nikki, what's your takeaway on this?
We all get so weird together, don't we? Well, I loved what, of course, David said, that's mine always. But how about suddenly the thought crossed my mind? And then my line out says, but I have a program. So my second thought is, I am the daughter of the king. I am an intelligent agent spearhead. So but suddenly the thought crossed my mind. And there's a blank space in the book there, you guys. Put it in there for yourself. But I have a program, but I have a fellowship, but I have a loving creator. See, but it's like, but for the grace of God. Suddenly I have a thought, but for the grace of God, I'm slapped right back into, if you don't enlarge your spiritual life and put God first, you're going to die a slow, painful mental death, Nikki. So I'm just so grateful. I'm really grateful to know that to think for Nikki M is to die. So what do you think, Nikki? I think, what does the book say?
Love the music that comes in. Thank you, Nikki. My takeaway today is also on this concept of failing to enlarge my spiritual life. I think I've got steps 1 through 3, and I don't say this, arrogantly or whatever, but I get it. I've gone through the painful process of these and the growing process of these. I think I've got my steps 10 through 12 down pretty dang good. But if I'm failing to enlarge my spiritual life by working and continuing to apply and implement steps 4 through 9 in my daily life, it's going to sneak up on me. It's going to bite me in the butt, maybe 25 years down the road, maybe tomorrow. But this need to avoid failing to enlarge my spiritual life and is screaming loud at me today. So that's my takeaway. Everybody, this is such a great way to go through the book. I'm grateful that David and Nikki are willing to do this, make this project happen. It's really helping me out a ton. Hopefully it's helping you out. Drop us a line sometime if you have questions for any of us. Come on in, send us an email to rico12pod@gmail.com. We'd love to interact with you. Keep coming back. Enlarge that spiritual life. Don't just sit in here and do nothing but share in a meeting, put your book on the shelf in between meetings and not think about it again until the next time you come in, because it takes some work. Work it. You are worth it.